the goal was the American Fender Stratocaster, but no kid had $1,000 in his pocket. So we went and picked up the little nickel want ad pages. Are you familiar with that? Back in the day?
Welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. Here's your host, Scott Cowan.
Well, welcome back to this episode of the Exploring Washington State podcast. My guest today is Matt Ackerman, and Matt is the owner of, well, Matt, you tell the people. I don't want to talk. You introduce yourself. Tell us what you do.
I'm going to have to use an intro that quickly the next time we do our broadcast, because that was on point. I own and operate Endorian Guitarworks out of, it's not in the city of Olympia, Washington, but down here in Thurston County, Washington.
Okay.
So it is a business which started off as repairing guitars, and then sort of went down the rabbit hole of, well, what else can I do with this? What is my purpose and my calling around music? And so we started offering like an educational component. The next place I went with this was a podcast, or it wasn't a podcast. It's an Instagram broadcast called Endorian Guitarworks Backstage. And the mission of that is a guided look at the life experiences and ways and means of a guitarist's journey. So that's probably one of the most fun things that we do at Endorian Guitarworks is bring on hosts much like you do and talk about, or guests much like you do, and talk about what they've been doing in the music industry and their challenges and their passions and the direction that they're going. The whole point to meet other guitar players on their journey and help people take the next step, whether they're like a seasoned pro or whether they're just considering picking up the guitar for the first time. Really try to meet anyone and walk with them.
So before you opened up Endorian, what did you do? What was your journey to get here?
Man, I think I got lost on that map.
You had a map? I never had a map.
Well, it was scribbled on the back of a Denny's napkin, right? So I'd been a musician. I've been a guitar player for the better part of my life. I picked up the guitar when I was 14, and I knew that I was a musician, and that's what I wanted to do. But then at some point, I let probably one too many people talk to me about money and retirement and safe lifestyles and, the big quote, safe. So I became an office worker, and so I went to college and then came out of college and almost immediately ended up working for the state of Washington in various roles at various agencies. Most recently, I just left my state job of 4 years at the Washington State Healthcare Authority as a communications consultant. And it was a great time. Met a lot of wonderful people and had wonderful experiences, but sort of the fast story through COVID, through pandemic, through all the experiences of realizing that life is short and we have one chance to do this, I recognized it was time to reconnect with what really, fueled my fire, which was music in one capacity or another.
Okay. So when you were 14, what was the motivation? What inspired you to pick up a guitar?
Well, I think the first time I picked up a guitar was more like me hassling my parents into, I need a guitar. I think I was probably 6 or 7. And I heard, the Van Halen solo on Michael Jackson's Beat It, and broke tons of my dad's record needles just sneaking down into the basement, listening to that guitar solo over and over and over again. And my dad finally hooked me up with a guitar. And what that really means is we went out to the garage and grabbed a couple slabs of plywood and a 2x4 and nailed them together and stretched some like literal string from one side of the 2x4. This thing was so incredibly heavy. And given that I was, step forward a couple of days, spinning around in the basement, playing Rockstar. My mom ran an in-home daycare. I'm effectively swinging this insanely heavy hazard around, and no one died, which is fantastic. But that was, I think, when I knew I wanted to play guitar, but there was no real guitar in my future. And then around the age of 14, we were hanging out with some other families that went to my parents' church, and one of them was a guitar player, and he handed me this nylon string classical, and he showed me 2 chords, and I just started trying to string ideas together with these 2 chords, and it was during that weekend where our family friend looked at my dad and mom and said, you probably ought to nurture this a little bit. I think he might actually know how to do this. So got an acoustic and just sort of embarked down. That was the beginning.
Okay.
And of course that was the year that I think it was a couple of years after Green Day Dookie came out. And I remember hearing that tune when I was 12 years old, painting the fence in the backyard, hearing Basket Case for the first time come on over the radio. And I was 2 years prior to actually owning a guitar, but that was just, feeding it. And, I had got an acoustic when I was in 8th grade. And, then that was my purpose. If I wasn't at school, I was at home playing guitar, and sometimes I would fall asleep with it and then wake up and keep playing, wake up in the morning. Oh, I got to shower and get to school. It was guitar. That was life.
When did you get your first, because, Green Day doesn't really translate to the acoustic very well, I guess, to me. I mean, it doesn't,
but I didn't stop. You just play.
Right. But when did you get your first electric, and what was it?
It wasn't long after that.
Yeah.
I remember we picked up, because at that point in time, you had to have money. Of course, the goal was the American Fender Stratocaster, but no kid had $1,000 in his pocket, so we went and picked up the little nickel want ad pages. Are you familiar with that? Back in the day,
I was, yes.
Picked up the little nickel want ad pages and just looked for something that was in my budget of mowing lawns, and found for $75, this Harmony electric. And for any listeners who, some of them probably have some experience with Harmony, but Harmony was an interesting brand. They started off as sort of a boutique brand, and then they quickly became a JCPenney catalog brand. And now they're back to the boutique side of things, producing some fairly high-end stuff. If you walk into Chicago Music Exchange, they have an entire wall of Harmony, and the guitars start around like $2,000.
Okay.
But this guitar was more of the JCPenney caliber, and it came with a guitar amplifier which was powered by, I think, like 6D batteries. But it was an electric guitar, and that's all I cared about, and that was gonna put me in the pocket, and I was gonna learn how to play. So I spent $75 on that. My dad and I hopped in the car. We lived in Renton, Washington, effectively, and drove over to the neighboring town of Issaquah, and picked it up from this kid who was trying to, quote unquote, save for a real electric guitar. Should have been a tip off, but I wanted an electric, so I bought it. And I remember upon leaving his apartment, he said, "All right, now we can afford pizza tonight." And my dad I didn't really understand how that was a really meaningful statement. Like, if you're going to save for something, actually save for it. But I bought a guitar and he was getting pizza. But that was my first electric.
Okay. All right. And how was that guitar?
I was lucky enough to find a friend who wanted to trade.
Were you still friends after the trade?
Yeah, he wasn't as passionate in playing as I was. He had one of those 3/4 sized electrics that was actually built very well. Okay. And I had a full sized electric that didn't play. I was more concerned about being able to play the instrument, and he wanted something that looked more normal when he held it. And so I guess it was an equitable trade given the motivation. But yeah, so the guitar number 2 was this thing called a Gremlin. And I played that until I could afford a Mexican Squire Stratocaster. It had one pickup, a volume control, and it got the job done.
Okay. Have you ever in your journey gotten the American-made Strat?
I did not purchase an American-made Strat. I decided to make my own.
Okay.
So, like, I don't know. I like building guitars now. So I could go out and get one, but I like the one I built better. So I'm happy with it.
So middle school, 14, 15, 16 years of age, you got your first electric, then you got a 3/4 size electric that you could actually play. did you do the whole garage band thing? Were you just a kid that sat in your room and practiced all the time?
It was a little bit of both. I spent most of my time practicing in the bedroom. What stopped me from doing the full-on garage band for a while was just simply not having an amp that was like loud enough to compete, right? Mm-hmm. But eventually, you hang out with the right people, you meet the right people, and you realize that sometimes there's just gear left over at the house, and not having the right gear is not necessarily a barrier to playing music. So I started spending a lot of time with the really good high school drummer, and we've become really good friends and still are to this day. I did some garage band type stuff, and then actually ended up spending a couple of years in high school jazz band with each other, which was an amazing opportunity for growth and really kind of challenging what you thought you wanted to be as a musician and where you were going to hone those skills. But playing behind a big band really affords you the opportunity of getting better fast. So we did a lot of that. When you were
playing in high school jazz band,
mm-hmm.
Where were you getting your inspiration from in that arena? What sort of jazz players were you listening to that were inspiring?
I probably should have done more listening to jazz. I never really felt like my jazz vocabulary was pushing me. It was just knowing that, I had a job to do, and that was to support, to be part of the rhythm section. Mm-hmm. I actually was, I think my biggest, I wouldn't say he was an inspiration, because he wasn't, or I was into Buddy Rich. Everything that we were doing was really, really intense, powerful, driven jazz. And I was just a guitar player, and I wasn't really in love with jazz music. I just loved to play it. I really didn't, I think at the time I was really just trying to be involved rather than carve out what I wanted to do. So jazz band, I knew like it was important to me to be part of the jazz band because I was surrounded by incredibly talented musicians. But it wasn't really jazz that called to me. I was always going to be a rock and a blues player. So if I was listening to jazz, I was listening to Buddy Rich.
Okay. And where'd you go to high school?
I went to Kent Ridge High School.
Okay.
Yeah.
They had a pretty good jazz program, right?
They did. It was under the direction of Paul Harshman, who is now in Seattle. Yeah. I figured you might know that name.
His,
So you understand the
yes. Now
the expectation to grow and be incredibly good.
His brother Chris
mm-hmm.
had the dorm room next to me my freshman year.
And as I understand it, Paul Harshman still I think he was a hell of a runner.
Yes.
I think he still holds some a track record at Central to this day.
The three Harshman brothers were
mm-hmm.
not normal. They were superhumans. They all three had these larger than life personalities. I'm a kid. So I went to my first year at Central was 1980, to give you perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I grew up listening to 70s rock and roll, 60s and 70s rock and roll. And Harshman, he's listening to jazz music. Never heard any of this stuff before. Right. And I'm like, what is this stuff? But over time, because I had no choice but to listen to, because he played louder than I could play my stereo. And his one roommate was really into the Beatles. So there was they were just an interesting trio of brothers. Let's just put it that way. Super outgoing, super big personalities. Yeah, that's funny that you say that name. And like I said, before we hit record, all roads seem to lead back to Central in some capacity.
Yeah, they really do. Auditioning for Paul was, and I think I'm 40 now, so it was 20 some years ago. It was a real experience. The first year I auditioned, I guess it was how did they do high school? Well, we started high school in the building a year after high school actually started. So it was 10th grade. So 10th grade, I wanted to audition for jazz band, and he wasn't having it. I don't really remember the reasons, but I think it had something to do with, one, I wasn't good enough, and two, I wasn't playing in the other band, and I needed to earn some of this cred before I could walk into the school and audition for this band. So I was not allowed to. And I spent the next year, my goal was to be good enough to walk into those auditions and land it. And no one was going to tell me that I wasn't going to be good enough, regardless of what kind of music I was inspired by. Mm-hmm. And so junior year of high school, my God, I can't believe we're rehashing these memories. It's fantastic. I walked in and I had no idea what to expect. There were two guitar players, me and a guy who absolutely loved to death. Haven't seen him since high school, but a great deal of respect for this kid named Jeff. And I didn't realize it at the time, but now I know what Harshman was doing. And he had two very, very good kid guitar players at his disposal, and he was going to not necessarily like pit us against each other, but he knew that we would use that competitive nature to drive each other up. And I won't say this officially, but I don't think he really wanted a guitar player in the jazz band, but if he was going to have one, he might as well have two that are pushing each other to be the best that they can be. And so he actually sat two guitar players in the jazz band that year. It was, which, in a high school jazz band, that's not unheard of, mm-hmm. but it was unheard of for Paul Harshman.
Okay.
So Jeff and I, pushed each other the entire junior year, which, culminated in like the last concert of the year. He actually let us do like a guitar solo over some Thad Jones funk. And I think that year of my life really formed the expectations that I would have for myself and that level of perfectionism that I was going to take in everything that I ever attempted to do in my life, which is, I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but it is what it is. And I will always remember that year as the year that I knew that I had to bring my best to anything that I did.
Okay. Well, what happened senior year? Were you in jazz band your senior year as well?
I was. Senior year, it all fell apart because a lot of the seniors, that guitar, the band from the previous year was mainly seniors. So they had all graduated, and it was just sort of a thing of timing. The jazz band that year was dominated by incoming sophomores, because freshmen were actually in a different building in that structure. They were in junior high. So it was effectively like a jazz band of 10th graders, and a brand new jazz director because Paul had decided to switch districts. So it, it was not a good year. Okay. I was frustrated, but any 18-year-old does not understand necessarily that you're going to have to push yourself. Sometimes you have to make the best of what you have. But I don't think I was mature enough at the time to understand.
Yeah, most of us at 18 weren't. So
we're probably not. Yeah.
So we know, or at least I know, that you ended up at Central.
I did.
All roads lead to Central.
I did. Yep.
What was your musical experience like at Central?
It was great. I looked at a couple different universities in Washington, and it was a weird experience, like even trying to figure out where I wanted to go to school for music. I did not look at the University of Washington because I didn't think I needed to get further away. I looked at Washington State University, and they wanted to throw money at me and train me to be a drummer, which I didn't get. Like, they didn't have a guitar program at the time, and they were building an audio production studio, but they openly said, we're not going to have curriculum for this for another 2 years. So I was like, well, this just feels weird. I checked out Western Washington University, whose jazz program was under the direction of Chuck Israels, who's just, incredible. But I think he was a little strong for my personality at the time. And I was really on the defense by the time I went and met with Dr. Peter Grease at Central. And when I walked in to go meet him before I even auditioned, he was so incredibly welcoming and accepting and just wanted to meet me as a person before we even talked about music. And that was what I think I needed. That was the moment that I knew that if they would have me, that's where I was going to go, because I needed that component at that time. And so I did my requisite freshman, music basics classes. I was aiming for a major. I ended up only getting a minor because I made a switch into communications. But, I took the theory classes and the class piano classes, and I don't even remember half of them. But I do remember all the classes that were taught by Dr. Grease, because he made learning music theory it was so incredibly exciting to understand the physics of sound and the mathematics of sound and what there was hidden in the notes that you wouldn't necessarily know was there. And it made it like for a guy like me who also likes science fictions like Star Trek and Star Wars and all this kind of stuff. Like, I want to tease everything apart and understand how something works. To walk into a room where for the first time somebody says, all right, I want absolute silence, and they open up this Bossendorfer grand piano and just smack down on the lowest key on the piano and just insist on silence as that fundamental note separates into 10, 12, 24, all these different, like a choir of notes all emanating from the same fundamental note, and then explaining how this works. That was such an incredible experience. And that style of learning was prevalent with every instructor that was there. When I was in Jazz Band 2, under Gary Williams, he had that same encouraging nature to get me to get out of the box of just the typical big band guitar player. I had sort of been conditioned to, you stay over there, you stay in your lane, and you make sure there's a feel. I'll let you know when I want to hear from you. Mm-hmm. But when I was playing with Gary, he said, you're part of this. I want to hear what your ideas are. And that was important, I think. I think that helped sort of lend balance to the other experience.
So with Gary, did you ever hear him play any Rush? There may have been a Rush cover when I heard him play with his band, Ecstasy in Numbers, but I did not explicitly hear him play Rush. Yeah, he was, it was frightening listening to him play. Yeah. In a good way, Oh, yeah. He was an amazing drummer. I played under Gary for my freshman year. And then, as I mentioned, I sort of made a move into the communications land, and I didn't see Gary again until I moved down to Olympia, Washington. And I didn't know I was going to see Gary, but down in Olympia, they have this festival 2 times a year. They have Arts Walk, and it happens in the spring and in the fall. And I had just started this job. I've clearly fast forwarded a bit, but I just started this job and I didn't know anybody. And my coworker said, "Hey, are you going to head down to Arts Walk? There's this trio I want to see. The band's got this amazing drummer." This coworker happened to be a drummer, and he really wanted to see this drummer. I said, "Yeah, sure. Let's go." And we walked into this little store that sells tea, and there was this jazz trio set up, and lo and behold, it was Gary. Gary, I hadn't seen, last time I saw him was in Ellensburg, Washington. Here he is down in Olympia. He had moved to Bremerton to teach. So he was down in Olympia quite frequently. And I hadn't seen him for probably 8 years, and walked right up to him. And he struggled with my name, but he absolutely knew who I was. And we caught up, and he was such an amazing man. Yeah, he was. So he was the same year at Central that I was. So, kind of referencing back to the whole Harshman thing. Yeah. All these loops that connect back. So after Central, you started doing the office worker gig because you built to pay. To paraphrase, people got in your head and told you needed a job with retirement. I grew up with that same advice coming to me too. Is like, save 10% of what you make, work for a union job, and retire. Yeah. Tried to follow that. I was a round peg in a square hole. That was just, I ended up needing to do what I do. So after college, were you still playing guitar? Did you put it down for a period of time, or?
Directly after college, no, I left the rock band that I had started in college because I knew that I was coming back over to the west side of the mountains, and so there was a departure, not like some big dramatic VH1 behind the music departure, but I said goodbye and said, hey, this isn't goodbye, it's see you later, but it came back over, yeah, came back over to the other side of the mountains and tried. At the time there was no. I don't even remember if we had MySpace yet, but there was Craigslist. And, it felt weird to be surfing Craigslist to try to find somebody. You didn't really know what you were going to end up with. And I found a couple of musicians that, tried to try them on like shoes, and it just wasn't really happening. So I just kept playing. And then as luck would have it, several of the members of my band decided that they were done with Ellensburg and they were going to move back to the Seattle area. So we kind of put the band back together with a slightly different lineup and continued to play from early 2005 to 2009 or so.
And what was the name of that band?
That band was named Northwater. It was named after North Water Street in Ellensburg, Washington, where the jam space was. Oh no! Let's hear. Is the Dairy Gold building, right?
Oh, see, so much changed over there. That area of town, back when I was there, we called it Dogtown.
Yeah.
And there was nothing going on over there. And now when you drive through Ellensburg, it's kind of frightening. But Northwater, okay, that made me
Dogtown was still on the other side of the. This was a lot closer to downtown. I think it was an old Elks building. But like if you're heading down Main Street, like you're going to the Palace Cafe, but you head, I guess it's to the west. Yeah, that's where water. Yeah, and there's this old building that it wasn't quite where I think the Dairy Gold building was in Dogtown, and that was a trip. But
the old Elks is now the Hotel Windrow. I think they converted that into a nice hotel.
And I don't, someone's going to fact check me listening to this, so I don't know that it was the Elks, but it was. I thought it was like an old. What do you call those? Elks, Eagles, the
fraternal organization.
Fraternal organizations, yeah. I thought it was one of those that nothing was going on, so the landlord basically like loaned out keys and rooms and said here. So that's how that band got its name, and then we played in Seattle quite a bit, and then as many bands do, there are certain substance abuse issues with certain members, and it just fell apart. Okay. But that's okay, because at the time I was having a kid, so I needed to be dad.
So what type of musical influence was that band?
That was very, very Tool heavy. Tool and if you can imagine a blend between Tool and Chevelle, that was Northwater.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
What happened after that? You had a kid, so dad mode, but you're still playing guitar, right? You didn't.
Yeah, I never stopped playing guitar until probably, and when I say probably, like there was an acknowledgement later in life that I had stopped and didn't realize I had stopped, but I continued with the intention of playing until about 2016. I played in some various side projects. I did a lot with a local Olympia theater because I was not successful in putting any bands together. So I hooked up with a theater troupe who was interested in doing, well, at first there wasn't guitar. They were like, are you interested in doing sound design? So I did some sound design for some productions. And then they said, we want to step this up a little bit. We want to do this music. We did Cannibal the Musical. And we want to have it backed. We want live music for this. So would you be interested in trying that hat on? I said, yeah. So we formed this little 1, 2, 3, this 3-piece, playing the soundtrack to Cannibal while also running sound for Cannibal while the actors were on stage. And I did a lot of that type of work to scratch the musical itch between 2010 and on. And yeah. That's a wild experience, by the way. Like if any theater group ever comes up to you as a musician and says, "Are you interested in doing a musical?" Just don't even, yes is your answer. Just give it a try. It's fun.
Well, elaborate on that. Why do you feel so strongly about that?
Well, it's a whole different experience. Like I think a lot of people will lump musicians and actors in the same bucket of artists and just say that they're all the same type of people, but they're not. And it stretches you to figure out how to do what you want to happen. So there's like this first phase of musical maturity where it's like you realize that when you're trying to make music, you're not just trying to be self-serving, but you want to serve the music. But when you're doing musical theater, you have to serve the music so the music can serve the actors.
Okay.
And there's a whole different, level, and then the relationships that go along with it. And, just what it takes to conceptualize, like, to go from a reading of a play to strike after the last show. It's an emotional mess of a roller coaster, but it's all very worth it. Okay. And those friendships go forever.
All right. That's very cool. Let's talk about your Endorian.
Sure.
First off, how'd you come up with the name?
So yeah, people have asked me if it's a Star Wars copy, and obviously I'm going to answer no. When we moved out to this house in you can't, no one in the podcast can see the house, but I moved out with my wife and children to this property in early 2018. And the first thing that we said is that, oh my God, it looks like we just moved to Endor. We are just in the trees, and it kind of became our joke.
Okay.
But officially I will say it's a nod to the Dorian mode of the major scale.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't, there's nothing Star Wars about the brand other than it sounds like
okay.
It might live on Endor. Yeah.
All right. What was your motivation to start offering guitar repair services?
That was absolutely a result of kind of losing my mind in the
I shouldn't laugh. Sorry.
The ice. No, it's okay. It's like, it's such a common story at this time. And like, don't get me wrong. Like I was way more guarded about my mental health. I think when I was, officially working for people that could, make recommendations, like if you're working for the government and someone gets the idea that they think that you're not okay, then they start going to your boss and they start going to the employee resource center and start saying, oh, I'm worried about this guy, but everyone was struggling. Well, not everyone. I mean, I was always kind of envious of those introverts without children who had long commutes, because for them it was a paradise. They didn't have to see people. They didn't have to try to homeschool their children while they were also working, and they didn't put gas in their car anymore. So for them it was a vacation, and they got paid for it. And I was a naturally extroverted creative with 3 kids at home, with a bad internet connection, trying to wear too many hats, and I was really self-destructive, and trying to figure out, was it still worth, like, I was really struggling just being here, and watching me, snapping at my kids who just, think it's so cool to have dad working at the table, and I'm more focused on whether I'm going to get a press release written in time than I am in, caring about my children's mental health. And, all at the same time, I'm not doing anything that's relevant to me in the soul. And so July of 2021, and, sort of tangentially, but directly, I guess, directly related, I had not realized that for so many people, by July of 2021, this whole concept of isolation had gone away. Like, so many people had gone back to the office, their lives had really gone back to normal. They just had to wear a mask occasionally. But if you worked for the state of Washington, we were still locked down. There was still an expectation that, you work from home. Daycares were sending your kids home if somebody had a sniffle 3 blocks away. We were sort of living in a pseudo lockdown. So it was weird because I'd have friends that didn't understand why it was so hard until they would like talk with me and realize I had no idea that you were still in your basement all the time. Like, yeah, I don't have a choice. And so that's a long walk to get to. Around July, I just had to find a way to stay relevant and find something that kept me whole on the inside. And I said, well, if I'm not performing music, and there's nowhere to perform music, and there's all these Instagram guitar players out there, there's still people playing instruments. And I've always been a person who wanted to take things apart and work on things, and I've always worked on my own guitars. So why don't I just go out there and plant my flag and say, this is what I do. And so that's what I started doing. I made the shirts. I made the webpage. I stood firm in my belief that I can do this just as well as the next guy. And if I build it, they will come, as the great Field of Dreams quote goes. And they came slowly, but they did. And fast forward to about March of 2022, I recognized that I had all these ideas. By this point, we had already launched the podcast in addition to me repairing guitars. And I said that I've got this idea that I'm still trying to be super dad. I'm still trying to work in a remote environment. And I've got this business on the side that I'm only feeding with crumbs, like with what's left over. Like I was complaining about not having enough energy before. And now I'm like finding more energy to give this. What in the hell could possibly happen if I just gave it everything? So I took the leap and gave notice and decided, well, I mean, there were some long conversations with my spouse to make sure, can we do this? What's the budget going to look like? But we found a way. So yeah, now I'm doing this full time.
How's that feel?
It's scary as hell. Excuse me. I don't know. I'll give you the G-rated version too.
That's that's PG. We're good.
It's absolutely terrifying. But the fact of the matter is, it became more terrifying to sit with the idea of continuing to sit still than it was to take a risk that may or may not work out. And, people have asked me like, well, what's your plan B? And like, there are people that say, don't think about plan B because you're going to be unsuccessful if you think about plan B. I'm sort of a hybrid. I think I wrote plan B down on a piece of paper and locked it up, and I'm not going to think about it.
Okay.
I'm fully committed, and it's just, it feels terrifying, but it also, for the first time, I'm realizing that I am literally working for myself. And that's a weird thing. There's so many entrepreneurs out there that this is life. This is what you do if you want to make a living. But, for the first time, I don't have a to-do list that's effectively governed by by my customers. I have a to-do list that's governed by what I want to achieve, by my direction. I've got this giant whiteboard of I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this to do that. And yeah, I mean, I told my friend, I said, I don't want this to feel like a midlife crisis. And he said to me, he's like, dude, it is a midlife crisis. There's nothing wrong with a midlife crisis. It's how you react to a midlife crisis. You're going to go out and have an affair and buy a Corvette? Or are you going to do something that's going to push you forward and make you great? Like, oh, okay, fine. So it's a midlife crisis. I'm just handling it well.
To me, the energy it takes to not know is more exhausting than the energy of knowing of success or failure. And so I applaud you for jumping in.
I don't remember when I had become an individual that was satisfied with this idea of starting a 30-year career and just kind of staying put and then waiting for retirement. Because you're completely betting on the fact that, quite honestly, that you're going to get there. And I have seen, and this is where it gets a little dark, but I have seen more than my fair share of individuals not make it to the age of retirement. And what's even more heartbreaking are those that make it to retirement and somehow end up leaving us a year or two after they're retired. and this the notion that you should pay your dues and then have fun, it just doesn't sit well with me. I think you should be having fun while you're paying your dues. You know, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard, but, and you know, I'm encouraged to know that there's a lot of people that are out there that figured that out a lot sooner than I did. But that doesn't mean that you don't need to course correct along the way. So that's what I did.
Did you know of a guy in Ellensburg named Frank Johnson? He was a local guy, bass player.
I don't think so. I know Jumpin' Johnny.
Frank played in a band with a friend of mine. And he was a tile setter on this, you know, that was his day job. He set tile. Well, he finally retired at like 70 years of age. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Think about tile setting, getting up and down. That's hard on the body, knees, bad things, all this stuff, right?
Yep.
He retired and he went on a trip down to the Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico, and was killed in a car wreck.
Yeah.
Right after retirement. You don't know.
No,
you don't know. Yeah. There is no guarantee that your golden years will be golden, or that you'll have them. So I think you're, once again, kudos to you for jumping in and doing this. What sort of services are you providing? And I've got some questions about that. I know next to nothing about guitars. They have 17 strings, right? So what sort of services are you providing at this time?
You know, when I started off, it was I was dipping my toes in, you know, slowly. So I would say that most people come to me for they've got a guitar and it's just not playing quite right. It might need a setup. It might just, maybe they want new pickups or new switches. Sometimes you've got old dirty guitars that are just dusty and need to be, spit polished and shined up, right? Not really, but and then there've been some more complex, more repairs that are more deserving of a true luthier, which has caused me to sort of like go back to school. I did not think that the number of people that have come to me and say, "Hey, I would like to have my guitar refretted." I didn't think that there was going to be that that kind of demand. So that is currently one of the things that I'm working on getting better at right now, because I wouldn't feel good taking a customer's guitar right now and refretting a 30-year-old Gibson Les Paul until I'm 100% satisfied. I just didn't see the demand. There is. But I think what you can get from that is that I'm not going to take a job if I can't give you 100%. But yeah, mainly I touch electric guitars and we, do custom pickups. What kind of sound are you looking for? It's a real consultative process as well. Like some people have a guitar that they want. They really love the look of this guitar. Actually, I had a customer call me the other day. He was super stoked about this guitar. He just ordered it from Texas. He bought it specifically for the aesthetic, and some certain other elements. And he's like, but I hate the way it's wired and I do not like the electronics. Can you do this for me? Absolutely. Bring it over. Let's talk. So we're going to basically hot rod the entire thing and give it new guts and set it up and make it a heavy metal guitarist dream.
Okay.
And then I dove into starting to build my own. So that's something that's coming in 2022 and 2023 is I'm building a line of electrics, one primarily with myself, one line with my daughter, who has expressed interest in showing some artistic creativity. And so she's actually going to be painting some of these. And then one line with a local artist who are going to effectively do the same type of thing. I don't have a storefront, so he is going to lend his time and energy to basically do a line dedicated to his artistic brand. And then I'm going to build the guitars. He's painting the guitars, and then we'll be selling them out of his shop.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
What would be so a customer calls you up.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the dream job? They've got a fill in the blank guitar, whether it's let's say a 57 Fender Telecaster or whatever. You get to, you fill it in and they want X done to it. What would that look like for you right now?
I don't want to avoid your question, but honestly, I think it's less the job and more the repeated business. When somebody like it, the answer to that is more sort of like based in the question itself. And that's it. If somebody has called me up with a 57 and said, I want you to be the one to work on it, it doesn't matter if they just need a truss rod adjustment or, you know, a fret and dress, or I need a new pickup installed. It's the fact that there's that element of trust that's already there, and it's still an opportunity to show that you're the best. But I guess if there was really a dream job, if you were to say, what is the dream
what's the
job?
holy grail of a guitar?
The holy grail is if somebody says, hey, I'm going on a 10-week tour and I need a tech to go with me, and I figure out a way to make it work and I go on the road.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. If somebody comes to you and says, like, you know, I can go buy a Fender Telecaster, or I can buy this thin line. Like right now I'm building a thin line with my daughter, and that means that I'm doing something right. You know, I mean, not just what's expected, but it's a really weird, like, intimate connection to be creating an instrument. Like, not every instrument's the same. You go pick up 3 Les Pauls off the stand, they're all going to feel different. And if somebody is coming to you to have you do the right work, like so much setup work is honestly like, and someone's going to shoot me for saying this, but so much setup work is guesswork, right? Like I can set it up by the numbers and I can set it up like perfectly, but I also want to know how you play. Every time a customer comes over and drops off a guitar, the first thing I do, not the first thing, but after they tell me what they want, we have our consult and we talk. I said, before you leave, I want to watch you play for a few minutes, because I want to figure out their style. I want to see how hard are you attacking the strings. Are you more of a finger style? Are you a hybrid picker? Are you like, what kind of pick are you using? Because the way I set a guitar up, I'm going to first start with by the numbers, and then I'm going to play it and I'm going to replicate your playing while I'm playing the instrument. And if it doesn't do what it's supposed to do by the numbers, I'm going to tweak it a little bit. So when you pick it up, it plays exactly the way you want to play it in the style that you're playing it. So that sort of intimate connection between I'm delivering something to you that you're supposed to now dump your soul into in order to create art. That's wild to me. And that is kind of the dream. Like that almost makes every job the dream job, because you get to send another person off to go make art and be inspired with whatever tool they have, you know,
Very cool. You also teach classes, right? You're also teaching guitar lessons?
I am open for guitar lessons. I actually don't have many students right now. I have taught 10 to 15 students in the past, but right now I think it's a weird environment right now. A lot of people are doing a lot of home learning or independent learning. Mm-hmm. And there's folks that are still only wanting remote lessons, and some people that are insisting on in-person lessons. And it's like trying to find that fit. And it's also not I'm putting more effort into the physical side of the business right now than the lesson side, mm-hmm. but I am absolutely enrolling students at this time.
All right.
Yeah.
You mentioned you're going to be creating, what we'll call 3 lines of guitars over the next 12 months or so, until the rest of 2022 and 23. What else does the future look like? Not trying to put you on the spot and say, what's the secret plan, but what?
No, it's okay.
What? Do you want a storefront? You mentioned you don't have a storefront. Does that inspire you, or is that a negative to you?
Oh no, the storefront is. I would love to have a storefront, and I know exactly where I want it. It's just simply a matter of. That's a lot of Right now, I'm still building the business up to just. Recover the revenue of quitting a day job. Mm-hmm. You've got to be able to afford the space, right?
Right.
So yeah, no, I would love that if in the next 18 months, 18 to 24 months, I had a storefront up in our local area here. I see that as a huge strategy. And that's sort of a long story based on the geography of the area and where people live around here and where they're currently taking their guitars which for a lot of the people that live on Highway 101 is a long distance in one direction or another. And I think that I'm sort of in the pocket that could be very successful with that. And more immediately, I'm really loving what we're doing. And I say we here, and this is really the we element. The Instagram broadcast, and right now it's on Instagram, but platforms could change. But we do Endorian Guitarworks backstage, and I mentioned that earlier, I think. But that's the guided look at the life experiences and ways and means of guitarist journey. And I do that podcast with my friend and former bandmate Brian McCoy, who could not be here today. But that is the collaborative baby, and that is. And it's a lot like this, but we do it. It's a live show, and we live stream it over Instagram. And sometimes it's as simple as, let's do a tech show. And we're going to, I'll base a lot of the content on questions that have come to me. Like, how do I want to wire my guitar? I'm having trouble. Can you show me how to do this? So we'll do tech shows where I'll actually, like, on the counter in front of me, I'll dual cam. So one, you can see us, and two, you can see the guitar. And then I'll actually go through and rewire a guitar. And we've also had live performances by bands that we remote in and then push it out to Instagram, or we just do interviews. And we've done some really great shows, and we have more on the horizon over the next several months. And that is one of the things that I'm super excited about, seeing what we can do with this. That is, of course, has its own challenges. Like, what is the best format? What's the best way to engage people? What's the best time? Where is your audience? If your audience is in England, going on at 7:30 p.m. Pacific is problematic. But yeah, Endorian Guitarworks backstage is a blast, and it's resulted in us meeting a lot of great people too, and forming a lot of good networking and a lot of good professional relationships around that too. So
okay. So now we're going to ask you these are, by the way, any of your answers are perfectly okay. So there's no right or wrong answer here.
Sure.
You get to play one guitar for the rest of your life. What would it be?
One guitar for the rest of my life. I can't even pick any of the guitars that I have in the house.
I know it's an impossible question, but
it is an impossible question. I'm going to, I'm going to play along, and Jimmy Vaughn is going to give me his brother's number one.
Okay.
I would absolutely take Stevie's number one.
Okay. That actually,
I'd find a way to make it work.
That plays into question number 2, which is, if you could meet any guitar player, dead or alive, who would you want to meet and why?
That's actually going to be a toss-up between Stevie Ray Vaughan and Kurt Cobain.
So why?
Why? Well, Stevie Ray Vaughan, because obviously I consider him, as do many, one of the best guitar players that ever graced the planet and held the instrument. More than his music, I also, he went through certain personal struggles that he somehow was able to go into the darkness and come out again, and not just come out better for himself, but was able to channel that, like, not just into the notes on the guitar, but the message, that he was singing about, and even in the concerts about, like, when he would just make remarks and speaking to the audience, everything he did was about evangelizing for hope.
Okay.
And for taking care of people. And Kurt Cobain, like, having spent so much time in Washington, I struggle with living in Western Washington, and that's not people that love it here, that's great. I struggle with the gray. But one of the things that always gives me, if I'm really, really, really deep down in my funk and saying, why am I here? Like, why can't I be somewhere sunny? Somewhere that brings me, like, I wake up joyous. I remember things like one of Nirvana's first gigs, with the band as we know it, was in Rignall Hall, which is less than 2 miles from my house on the road that I live on. I can literally walk out into the road in front of my mailbox and I can say, I'm sharing space here with somebody who also did it. And, yeah, I don't know. There's a certain connection there. And I think, obviously millions of people would say they have that connection too. So I don't know what it is, but I just feel like if I could sit down and have a coffee with Kurt, I might see a little more clearly.
All right. Well, thank you for helping with an easy transition for me. You said coffee with Kurt, so I always ask everybody about coffee.
Yeah.
Where do you like to go for coffee in the greater Olympia area?
Lately, I've been I like to go to my kitchen.
Okay.
No, Olympia Coffee Roasters is pretty awesome. They're downtown on what road is that? 4th.
Yep.
Right across from City Hall, and they have a roast called Big Truck, which is pretty bold, and
yep.
I appreciate that roast.
Okay. When you're making coffee at home, what are you doing with it?
I'm a big fan of the Death Wish coffee. It's bold and it does the job.
Death Wish coffee. Okay. I love asking, one of the things is, I used to work in the Olympia area, so I know Olympia reasonably well. It's been 5-7 years since I've been there, but it is a worker.
Yeah.
Where's a great place to go get lunch in that area?
There is, there's an Indian restaurant that's down by my favorite bar, the Brotherhood. I believe it's called Great Cuisine of India, and they have a really awesome lunch buffet.
Okay.
One of the things that I'll start that over. Anyone who's living in Olympia will let you know that there are many places to eat, which is good. But the downside to this is many of these businesses are frequently turning over. So I would almost wager that most of the restaurants, or a great number of the restaurants that you were familiar with 7 years ago, might not be there.
Right. No, that was not surprising. As a musician, and now this is this is a 2-part question. As a performer, as a musician, where's the coolest place that you've played?
Showbox at the Market in Seattle.
Okay.
That stage is like thunder. And there's so much magic on that stage too. Like knowing who, sort of like that comment I made about just standing in hallowed ground, right?
Right.
When you're on stage at a place like the Showbox or the Central Saloon in Pioneer Square.
Oh yeah. Okay.
The sort of the mystery of who's been there before you.
Okay.
Actually, it's funny. I was working with a gentleman probably 15 years ago, and was telling him that I was playing a show at the Central Saloon in Pioneer Square. And turns out he had played that venue with a jazz group 30 years back, and so imagining that he was on that same stage playing a clarinet, while I was out there trying to burn the building down, with a heavy rock group. It's kind of weird.
Part 2 of that question is, where would you like to play that you haven't played?
I would like to play. I would like to go back to El Corazon and play at El Corazon. I guess that's all. That was also called the Graceland. I think it was called the Off Ramp too. I could be wrong there. Yep. It's like, for Seattle venues, it's kind of the perfect blend between big venue and intimate. It's sort of like the Whiskey A Go-Go.
Yeah.
And aside from that one stupid pole that blocks the view on the stage, to me, it's the perfect venue in Seattle. If it were still around, I would say the Rock Candy. The first rock show that I ever went to was seeing Sleater Kinney at the Rock Candy in the mid 90s. And then of course it was soon demolished and condos replaced it. But yeah, I would love to resurrect that place.
Okay. Where's the best place to see music being performed?
In Olympia, I would say I like the 4th Ave Tav when they were doing a lot of music. They've got a good separate. They've got a dedicated performance space behind the bar and the pool tables and whatnot.
Okay.
Played there a couple times. Yeah, 3 or 4 times I've played at the 4th Ave. And of course, like most smaller venues, it all depends on the sound guy who's the sound person who's running that night. But if you've got the right combination, it can be a great venue.
Okay. I love asking musicians like where your answers. There's a couple overlaps.
Sure.
But for the most part, past guests, the number one venue to play at or to see music at is the Triple Door in Seattle.
Yeah.
Everybody gushes about the Triple Door. The Showbox at the Market. I'm glad you said the Market, not Showbox Soto, because Showbox Soto's not a great place. Sorry, it's
no. I mean, it's
just a box.
It fills a need, but it is not the Market.
But the Market's a great venue. The last show I saw there, I think I saw it was a weird pairing. We went and saw X and Squeeze.
Okay.
So I'm not quite sure how those two ended up on tour together, but it was an interesting evening.
You know, I'm trying to remember. I think I've only seen one show at the Triple Door. I mean, it's a great. I don't think there's anything wrong with that answer. I think that it really depends on what type of show are you playing, right? You know, if I'm sitting down with a jazz group, or playing blues or something like that, you know, yeah, I would love to play it no matter what. But if I'm wanting to see people get sweaty and run into people and really just throw out that rock and roll vibe, then I'm going to want something that offers a little more free space, you know. And
the other thing,
Triple Door is a good answer.
But the other thing that I always expected, like when I throw out like, where do you want to play question?
Yeah.
I really expected more people to say the Gorge. I just, you know, I mean, like I've always, cause it's a cool venue. It's really large. And
I think for me, I've always just been more of a small to medium sized venue kind of person. I want to, don't get me wrong, I would go play,
of course, but
a giant stadium, or field like that. But there's something incredibly powerful about being able to connect. I mean, how do you feel about the show when you're so far back that you can be like, well, I can hear them, but I can't see them, you know? And I want the people at that show to all have this amazing intimate experience. And I feel like once you get to a certain size, that's just not offered anymore, other than like bragging rights to say, well, I went there and I saw them. Well, you did.
Well, but did you? Because I wanted to go see the Stones.
Right.
And my goal, if I was going to go see the Stones, was that I wanted to see them. I didn't want to watch them on the Jumbotron.
Right. Exactly.
And it's like, so I needed to be close enough that the Jumbotrons wouldn't catch my eye, because I would be easily distracted and go, oh, look, Mick's 17 feet tall now.
Yeah.
And then, you know, but I think the tickets were $3,000 a pop at that point to get, you know, close enough that it was not going to be, you know, Jumbotron.
Right.
And we didn't make that happen. And now that Charlie's no longer with us, I don't want to see. Seeing the Stones wouldn't be the same. So I like the smaller venues too.
Have you had anyone? Now that you've got me thinking about this, now I have like 5 other things that I would like to play. But I would love to play the Sky Church at the Mopop.
Yeah.
Or I will never not call it the EMP.
Oh,
That's
it's
what
EMP.
it was.
Come on, you're
It's
a
the
good
EMP.
company. It's the
Yeah.
EMP. No, that'd be a cool venue.
It's such a trip, and it's an unsuspecting space.
Yeah, no, that'd be a great
But
venue.
like
to play.
I've seen a couple. I saw Alien Ant Farm for the first time at EMP, and I'm going to be one of those guys to say I 100% love Alien Ant Farm, and it's not for that Michael Jackson cover, but they're just a damn good performing band.
Okay.
And yeah, I saw them in 2001 when they were there opening for Lifehouse, and no one knew who Alien Ant Farm was.
Okay.
But I think that counts as one of those smaller venues, but there's so much technology behind it. You're going to get a hell of a show there.
All right. That works. No, I mean, there's some great places. I when I lived in the greater Seattle area, we used to go to the Tractor all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not laid out very well. It's not, but I loved going to shows at the Tractor.
Mm-hmm.
That was just kind of a fun place to go. Or going way back in the day, like in the 80s, the Ballard Firehouse or the Underground.
I played the Ballard Firehouse once. I loved it.
Yeah.
I wasn't 21 yet, so they made me stay in a very specific place.
Right. Yeah.
There was some guy on stage before we played that meowed like a cat. He got up on stage with an acoustic guitar and just kind of meowed and played guitar. And I'm like, he's going to make everyone leave before we even get on stage.
That's wild. But see, you're too young. You missed maybe the coolest venue of all, though, was in Ellensburg, the Ranch Tavern. The Ranch Tavern.
Okay, where was that?
It was east of town. As you drove through town, you went up past the water tank up there, and it was just this old Quonset hut, but it had like, don't quote me on this, but something like the largest spring-loaded hardwood dance floor on the West Coast. So
I bet that was popular during the rodeo.
It was, yeah, because during the rodeo they bring country bands in, exactly. But the rest of the time it was rock and roll bands coming through, and lots of famous names have played there at one time or another, right? And
Very
and
cool.
it burned down in like '86, but and it wasn't a nice place and it wasn't comfortable, but it was, when you packed 700 people in there of college age in a town that was starved for music at that time. Yeah, right. It was a fun place. It was a really fun place.
Yeah, so, that sounds like a blast.
Yeah, it really was. So my last question for you is just my get out of jail free question.
Sure.
What didn't we talk about that we should have talked about?
That's the interview question when you go in for a job. What are your questions of us? I didn't expect to get that today. What should we have talked about that we didn't talk about? Once again, I'm glad this isn't live.
Well, we're not going to edit out a whole lot of it here, folks. So we're going to listen to you. We're going to let you just pause. No, the point here is simply is that did we not cover something that you would like to have made sure we brought up?
Yeah, actually, so I've had one of the things when you're launching a business is you've got that you don't necessarily see coming at you when you're thinking about how I want to build guitars, how I want to repair guitars, and how I want to network with musicians. One of the things that I never saw coming was that there would have to be this apparel component. I didn't think I was ever, what's that?
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I wanted a way to be able to, at first I thought, well, it'd be cool to have some shirts. And so I made a few shirts that said Endorian Guitarworks on it. And that was cool. Except, are you really going to wear a guitar store shirt if you like this is for somebody who's gotten the work done and they might want a t-shirt to go along with it, and that's cool. But one of the things that I really wanted to do with this business was really evangelize the mindset of, I don't care if you're a guitar player or whether you hiking is your passion or whether you like working on cars. It's that I want my business to echo a mindset that can relate with anybody. And so I sat down with my tablet and started coming up with different ideas. And that's how I came up with this. Fret less, rock more. So it's music punny, but it's really the idea of just like stop worrying and start doing. And so yeah, I mean, a little plug. I got hats and shirts and all that stuff with it. But what's cool for me is that I've watched people order these things that have never met me. They will never spend a dime in my shop. Maybe they'll order a guitar someday. But they're not coming to me from Fort Wayne, Indiana to put in a new pickup in their telly. But they love the hat. They love the logo. They love what it says about life.
Okay.
So it's in the trademarking process right now, which I probably should have done before I started selling the stuff. But, that's, if you ever see a social media post of mine, that's how I sign it off. Fret less, rock more. Because quite honestly, to me, that's what life takes.
I think we can close on that because I don't think we can do any better.
Scott, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm really sorry about my unstable internet connection out here.
We'll have, if somebody's made it this far, they'll know that we patched it all together and it's all good. It's all good. So Matt, thanks for taking the time to be here today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott.
Join us next time for another episode of the Exploring Washington State podcast.